Let's get things kicked off with the biggest game of the weekend. It's number 7. Penn State traveling to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. That game will be 12 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. Looking forward to this matchup, naturally. This is one that we circle every year as one of the great games of the college football season. Historically, however, it has not been kind to the Penn State Nittany Lions. They've lost 10 of the last 11 against Ohio State. They've lost 6 straight. Their last win was in 2016, and that was when Grant Haley returned the Marcus Allen field goal block to the touchdown and helped spur the Nittany Lions to a Big Ten title. They've lost 14 straight road games against AP top 5 opponents. Their last victory actually came in 1994. That was against number 5 Michigan. So it hasn't been kind at all to Penn State up to this point, but this year might be different, and partly because of how they're playing on the defensive side. Now, on paper, both teams in this matchup have unbelievable defenses. Penn State ranks 2nd in points per game allowed, while Ohio State is 3rd. Both teams are allowing under 10 points per game entering this contest, and this is the first time an AP top 10 matchup will feature 2 teams that are allowing fewer than 10 points per game entering the game since 2006 between LSU and Florida. So it's been a while to see teams playing this high-level defense in a clash between teams that are ranked in the top 10. The one thing and the caveat that a lot of people have pushed back on, well, who has Penn State played against? They've played just one top 50 offense this year. That was West Virginia in the season opener, and West Virginia ranks 48th. So they're not great, obviously, with who they've played against. But offensively, both teams have been pretty dang good. If you look at what Penn State's done to this point, 5th in points per game. They're the only team to rank in the top 5 in both points per game and opponent points per game allowed. Ohio State ranks 3rd in points per game in the Big Ten, obviously trailing Penn State and Michigan. So 2 teams that can also fill it up on the scoreboard as well. So very much looking forward to this matchup. And then historically speaking, this is the first AP top 10 matchup where both teams are averaging at least 35 points, while fewer than 10 points. We already referenced the 10 points per game moment ago. But when you have offenses that are also this high power, it's actually the first time we've had matchups like this with a great defense and great offense since 1973. So nearly 50 years since we've had a matchup like this. That was Notre Dame against Alabama back in 73. Let's talk about the quarterbacks for a moment. Drew Aller has been terrific. 241 career passes, 0 of which have resulted in interceptions. That's the longest active streak of passes attempted without an interception in the FBS. Kyle McCord, on the other hand, had a tough game against Indiana, right? Didn't look real comfortable. But since that point, he's really kind of rounded into form. 11 touchdowns against 0 interceptions in the last 5 games. But there is a little bit of buzz right now in Buckeye land that they might utilize Devin Brown a little bit in the red zone. Now, they seem to have had a package that might have some legs moving forward. Now, Devin Brown, seen him in the red zone at times this year, but I have a feeling that package might grow this week. It might catch Penn State a little bit off guard, and it'll get you an extra blocker in the event in which those yards become very hard to come by there in the red area. Here are the questions that are surrounding the game, like we always do. How does Penn State slow down Marvin Harrison? Now, if you look at Marvin Harrison, statistically speaking, he's been amazing, right? 31 catches, 604 overall, nearly 20 yards per catch, and 5 touchdowns. All that's amazing. That's great. And he torched Penn State last year. Had 10 catches for 185 in last year's game. So this is a game that he has played well in the past, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's played well again this year. The one interesting thing about Marvin Harrison this year, though, is he has had some drops. And for whatever reason, I can't really understand why. I can't ever really quantify these things. They seem to happen in bunches. And if you think the first 11 starts of his career, 0 drops. 0. Well, this year, through 6 games, he's got 5 drops, including 3 last week against Purdue. So it's a little bit strange. He hasn't been at his best as far as consistency, but his high-level plays are off the charts, and I don't think I need to explain that to any of you guys, but this will be a great matchup in good versus good, too, because I think Harrison, regardless of whether he draws Kalen King or Johnny Dixon, you look at the defensive backs for Penn State, they've done a pretty dang good job, and that's one of the key individual battles that will need to be won by either Penn State or Ohio State, depending on what side you're pulling for. The other question, can JT Tuimoloau do it again? Now, last year, this stat line, I almost have to like double check and triple check this because it's just absolutely absurd. Last year in the game, remember this game came down to the wire last year. He finished the day with 6 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 pass breakup. You heard all those stats. I'm not going to repeat them again because the stat sheet is so absurd that it's almost unfathomable. But unfathomable, whatever it is. I don't know. It's mind-blowing, if you will. Simpler term. I look at JT Tuimoloau. He could take over the game. And if you look at how Jim Knowles has kind of handled his defense this year, he's not trying to dictate as much with scheme, and he's really allowing individual players, their talent level, to jump to the forefront. I think that's the right recipe against Penn State. Looking at Penn State's rushing attack, run game, if you will. Is this the game where Penn State running backs go off? Now, they've kind of grinded it out this year, kind of a 3 yards and a cloud of dust mentality with Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. But the thing that I've seen from Singleton, for instance, like if he gets in the open field, he's gone. But there haven't been as many big plays in the run game as there were at times last year. Now, statistically speaking, it's been pretty good. They average 203 yards a game. They're 16th in college football in rushing offense. That's great. And Katron Allen's been very, very solid. I think he's a little bit more of that, pounded in there, hard yardage type of back. And then Singleton, of course, with the top end speed, those guys complement each other really well. So both, I think, backs are very capable, but neither are averaging above 5 yards a carry. So it's been a little bit in bunches, and that's methodical. It's solid, but would love against an Ohio State group to create some big plays. Now, you look at Ohio State's rush defense. It's been kind of the weakest part of their defense in the first half of the season, giving up about 110 yards a game. So maybe they'll be able to run the ball a little bit, but that is a significant question. If Penn State can't run the ball, I think that's a huge advantage naturally for the Buckeyes. Another huge question in this game. How healthy is Ohio State? For instance, at the running back position alone. Now, Travion Henderson didn't play against Purdue. Also didn't play against Maryland. But I seem to think, based on what I've read and what I've heard, he's available and will probably be okay in this one. But in the event he can't go or gets a little dinged up, then you would like to rely on Chip Trayanum. Well, Chip Trayanum went down with an injury against Purdue. He's got 51 carries on the year and is clearly a very, very important piece. Had the game-winning touchdown against Notre Dame, but he's banged up as well. Mayan Williams didn't play against Purdue, also a running back. So as a result, they've had to rely on Dallin Hayden, who is a really capable back, and every time he's gotten meaningful snaps, he's looked the part. Last year, had 102 against Indiana, had 146 against Maryland, 3 touchdowns in that game against Maryland. So he's clearly looked the part, but in the event in which Travion can't go, Chip Trayanum can't go, Maya Williams can't go, then expect Dallin Hayden to step up in that role, but they're thin at that spot like they were last year. It's crazy how many injuries Ohio State seems to have had at running back the last couple of years. Another injury I'm paying close attention to is Emeka Egbuka. Last year, Egbuka had 6 catches for 53 yards against Penn State. Now, he's really, really important. And Ryan Day wouldn't give a whole lot of insight as to whether or not he's going to be available this week. If I was kind of reading between the tea leaves, I would hope that he'd try, but I don't know at the moment if he's going to be anywhere near 100%, even if he goes. And then finally, Denzel Burke went down against Purdue. He says, Ryan Day says that he expects Burke to be back, but we don't know that either. So the injury list for Ohio State is of significance. So I'm looking at that, and that's something I'll monitor really close as we get a little bit closer to game time. A couple trends in this game. Penn State has covered 6 of the last 7 against Ohio State, and Ohio State is 2-7-1 against the spread against AP-ranked teams since the start of the 2021 season. This is going to be a little crazy. I'm just going to tell you. I'm taking Penn State. And I think Penn State, when you look at the roster, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Ohio State. When you look at the roster and how they're playing on the defensive side, I know it hasn't been against anybody, but I think they are tenacious on defense. I think Ohio State is too. I think this will be a low-scoring affair. This is a low-scoring affair, but I am leaning towards the Nittany Lions. I don't love it by any stretch, picking against Ohio State on the home field with James Franklin, who's never had success in games like this outside of an example or two back in the day. I feel like I'm rolling the dice. But Penn State's played them really close, and I do believe that this is the Penn State team that can get over the hump. They just need to make a couple big plays in the passing game, which is a big question mark, to be able to create some issues for Ohio State and to put the pressure on the Buckeyes up to this point.